Hello everyone! I finished reading the Infinity Gauntlet comic, and I have to say it is quite excellent. I did enjoy the movies, but there's just so many new characters in the comics, and it's also very different, and a lot more things is going on. I really found it very enjoyable, so if you're into that, I definitely do recommend it. But now it seems that I have to read much more, as this is only a part of a larger whole that I've only now discovered. Another thing I wanted to mention is the voting for the next series. There are already a lot of votes for the next series. If you are just hearing about this, the first thing you will see in the description below is a link where you can go vote for my next big series. And the third thing I wanted to address is my Discord channel. Now, one of the mods on my Discord channel accidentally erased almost 1,000 people, so if you are amongst those 1,000 who got accidentally erased, or you weren't and you would just like to join, also beneath the link to the voting will also be a link to my Discord server, and you are also welcome to join that. Now, about this game, it's a game played in 2004, it's a correspondence game. Now, what's a correspondence game? It's like a normal game of chess, but without any time limit. I mean, it's played without a clock, so one player makes a move. It's usually played between, not between players, but mostly between chess clubs. Here it's played between Le Chess Club, Chess Club, obviously, Le Chess Club, and Polish Grandmaster Radoslaw Jedynak. As this game was played in 2004, and Jedynak did not receive his Grandmaster title until 2006, so I believe during this game he was still an international master or maybe a FIDE master, but definitely not a grandmaster. And what's interesting about a correspondence game is that unlike a regular chess game, here you are allowed to use opening books and chess databases. So although you can consult a database or an opening book, you are in no possible way allowed to use an engine to check your position. So most of the times correspondence games will be of higher quality than regular games. Of course not always. It's like I mean, the opening moves will of course be excellent, as you can use an opening book and you can follow a certain grandmaster's game if you're allowed to use a database, but other than that you are left to yourself to decide where you want to go from there. So without further ado, this game is like the title suggests, it's just the best, so I sure do hope you enjoy it. So let's check it out. Le Chess Club opens with e4, and it seems that Radoslaw Jedynak here is playing against an entire chess club, or perhaps against only certain members of this chess club. I have no further information of this, so if you have any information of this, do share, and I will add your information you've shared in the description of the video, so everyone else can enjoy, or if you'll just write it in the comment, I can also pin your comment. But getting back to the game, we have e6, the French defense, d4, d5, knight to c3, and bishop to b4, the Winawer variation. We have e5, the advanced variation of the Winawer. We have c5, a3, this is all very standard. And here, most likely, if you play against this variation or this variation, you're gonna face bishop captures, pawn captures, and then black has a couple of good options like knight e7, maybe queen to c7. But here in this game, after a3, we actually have a retreat of the bishop with bishop to a5, and here Le Chess Club proceeds with queen to g4. I also wanted to point out here, as it does include a b4 move, a very nice variation here is actually b4. Here you offer black to capture a pawn, and if he does this with, for example, c captures on b4, then you have this very nice knight to b5 move, where you are threatening to jump here with knight to d6, and if black replies with something like b3 check, you can block with the c3 pawn, and here white has a very nice position. Black has to figure out what to do, and most of the times the black will just play bishop back to c7 to guard the d6 square, where you can simply recapture the pawn and you will have a very nice game. You can capture on c7 whenever you want. White is just okay here. But okay, I just wanted to mention this as it features a b4 move. In the game, queen to g4 was played. We have knight to e7, and here we have d captures on c5. So going away from the center, queen captures on g7 is a standard double pawn sacrifice by black. After rook attacks the queen, queen captures on h7. Black will capture on d4, and here we will have a forcing variation. After b4 attacking the bishop, bishop to c7, and now knight again goes to b5. And after a6, knight captures, queen captures, and black will have a very nice game. This is a very nice center if black will be able to develop his pieces. he should have a very nice game. So after knight to e7, we have d captures on c5. Bishop captures on c3, b captures on c3. Now you can see that white's pawns are tripled here, and black will have a very easy task of attacking them. So queen to a5, attacking both the c5 and, of course, the more important one, the c3 pawn. Here capturing on g7 is again too slow. If queen captures, then defending with the bishop will result in queen capturing the rook with check. And if you just move the king, then the rook will attack the queen. After the queen moves, you're going to lose the rook. Black will be up a rook and, of course, having a one game. After queen to a5, we have bishop to d2, guarding the c3 pawn. And now comes knight to g6. Knight to f3, defending the e5 pawn, and now knight to d7. Black also, instead of capturing on c5, wants simply to develop pieces. Bishop to d3, white is now ready to castle, and now comes knight captures on c5. We have castles by white, and here black can capture on d3, but if black captures, white will undouble his c pawns and will improve his pawn structure. He will be able to push d4. He will have a very nice center. So instead, black goes knight to e4. He wants white to give up this bishop for the knight, but without fixing his pawn structure. But also, it seems that after bishop captures, pawn captures, the queen will also be able to recapture the pawn. So it seems that black is actually offering a knight and the pawn here for the bishop, which doesn't really make sense. Why would he do that? The problem is white did play bishop captures on e4, and here not immediately recapturing the bishop, but first black's idea was h5. And it does make sense. The knight is controlling f4 and h4. You're kind of forcing the queen to go back, and only then will you recapture here. And now black's position is definitely playable. The problem is, after this h5 move, white had another resource that was not yet available to him when this pawn was still on h7. Here, instead of retreating with the queen, white, as this is a correspondence game, had fairly a lot of time to think about it, played queen captures on g6. So you already captured one piece, now you're capturing a second piece. Basically, you're giving up your queen for two pieces. We have f captures on g6 and bishop captures on g6. This comes with check. We have king to d8, and now, like we said, you gave up your queen for two pieces, but you want to keep the pressure. If you allow black to develop and to consolidate, then two pieces for the queen will simply not be enough. So c4 first. You want to open up lines and create possibilities of an attack against the black king, but also do it with tempo. Here the black queen is under attack. The queen has to move, and then only will you capture in the center. Queen to a4, and now comes pawn captures on d5. E captures on d5, you don't want to allow white to have this strong center. So after e captures on d5, now comes bishop to f7. White now wants to eliminate this pawn and open up lines for attack against the black king. And it's not all that easy to defend it. If you try something like queen here, then the rook can come to e1, attack the queen. After the queen moves, then this pawn is marching forward. It will be a very easy game for white from this moment on. So after bishop to f7, black decided to simply develop. We have bishop to g4. It would be very nice if you could open up the white king's position as well. We have bishop captures on d5. Now the bishop is also protecting the knight on f3. King to c7, and now comes rook a to b1. And here again black has problems. White is threatening to capture here, and there's really no good way to defend this. Yes, you could go bishop back to c8, but then your bishop is back to c8, you just played it to g4 and back, and there really is no good way to develop your rook here. So after rook a to b1, white had to play b6, and here white can actually capture on a8, but look at this bishop. It's a wonderful bishop, and this rook isn't really doing all that much. So white plays a much better move. We have rook to b4 with an attack on the queen, and now there is a problem. If you play queen captures on a3, then rook to c4 check will be deadly. King to b8, bishop to b4. Takes advantage of the queen's awkward position on a3, and now you either have to give up the queen or move the queen and suffer bishop to d6, and this will be checkmate, as the rook is controlling the entire c-file. So after rook to b4, we have queen to d7, retreating with the queen, rook to c4 check again, and here we have rook to b8. And now comes rook to d4. Again, you could capture here. Okay, if king goes to d8, then of course you can capture as nothing is guarding the rook. So the king, after this rook to c4 check, the king had to go to b8. But now white doesn't want to capture because this rook is doing absolutely nothing. And if you look at this bishop, look at all the squares this bishop is controlling. Well, obviously not the dark square, but obviously it's a much stronger piece than the rook that's doing nothing on a8. So instead of capturing on a8, first rook to d4. We have bishop to captures on f3. Now you can't capture with the bishop because the rook on d4 is unprotected, but g captures on f3. We have rook to d8, and now not c3. If you play c3, black's just gonna play this and say, okay, what are you doing here? I mean, captures, and then it's rook and rook against the bishop and the rook. Black has a better position, most likely black will be able to win this. So instead, you have to protect the bishop, c4. We have queen to e7. Now, if this bishop moves, queen to g5 check will be an idea, but also the queen doesn't want to allow this bishop to come to g5. So white simply plays h4. Also possible is e6 to prepare this bishop to f4 check, but then black can play h4, prevent white from playing h4, and then the king will be able to escape. Still, it will be a better position for white, but white decided that there's always time for e6. So first h4, preparing bishop to g5. And now with this threat of bishop to g5, what do you play here as black? There really isn't all that much you can do. If you try something like king to c7 to try and connect rooks and escape, now white will play e6. And now after whatever you play, there's really nothing to play. And one thing you don't want to do, you don't want to trade the rook for a bishop with rook captures on d5. You want white to capture here, but you don't want to capture here and create this monster pawn chain. Now this is a threat, and there's really not all that much you can do here. If queen moves, bishop to f4 check, king moves, now this rook comes here, and after this rook comes here, this rook is coming to c7, and the pawns will simply be too strong. So after h4, queen captures on a3, we have by black, and now comes the bishop to g5, attacking the rook, rook to e8, and now comes rook f to d1, showing that the e5 pawn is of course not available for capture. If rook captures, then simply bishop to f4, pinning the rook. If you defend it, nothing really happens here. Bishop captures on a8, queen g6 check, king moves, and now after captures and captures, you have two rooks and a bishop against the queen, easily winning. So after rook f to d1, queen to f8 was played, but now comes e6. And now there is very little you can do. Bishop to f4 is coming. a5 was played here, making room for the king on a7, but after bishop to e4, still not interested in capturing the rook on a8. It was in this position that Polish, at that time most likely international master Radoslaw Jedynak, resigned the game. He resigned because, whatever he does, let's say you capture this pawn, you're just gonna face rook to d8 check. You lose the queen, and now it's just a winning. After the king moves, rook captures here, it's all over. Rook and two bishops against the rook. On the other hand, after bishop to e4, you could try rook to a7, getting this rook out of the way, but rook to d8 still wins. And now you will either trade rook and lose the queen, or you will play king to c7 and now face this checkmate. And lastly, but of course not leastly, we have king to a7, but now you're actually facing a forced checkmate, so feel free to actually pause the video and find the winning idea here. I will give you a couple of seconds if you're interested in trying it. It's actually a very nice idea. For some reason, I use actually a lot in this video, but try to do it. For those of you who were able to do it, congratulations, it's a wonderful forcing idea. And for those of you who are just interested in enjoying the show, the move is rook to d7 check. Now, king to b8 is a weaker defense, so let's go king to a6. Now, you have to force the king back to b8. Bishop to b7 check, king a7, and now bishop to c6. And now if you go with the king to a6, then bishop to b5 will be checkmate, so now you have to go to b8 with the king. Here we have king to b8, rook to b7 check, king c8, and now this rook is coming to d7, and there is no defense against rook to c7 checkmate. You can give up the queen, but this will only prolong the game for a few moves. But yeah, that's basically it. After bishop to e4, Radoslaw Jedynak resigned the game, and this wonderful, wonderful game was created. So that's the game. I do hope you enjoyed it. I would like to thank Konstantinos Raumpedakis, Captain Marvel, Sitaram Reddy, Mosen Yonatpur, and Marton Radkai for a contribution to my channel. Thank you a lot, I really appreciate it. As usual, you can check 2 of my previous videos here. Thank you all for watching, and I will see you soon, hopefully with some more interesting content. Don't forget to vote for my next series, the link is in the description below, and also feel free to join my Discord server. Thank you all, and I will see you soon.